To welcome so many people from so far afield. This is a very quick whip through 900 years. I'll be doing the introductory part, then John will be taking over, and then I'll finish off. So here we go. Kett's Heights is a relatively small public open space. It's owned by Norwich City Council. It's steeply wooded and contains a medieval chapel, 19th century garden terraces, and a fantastic view overlooking Norwich. The steepness of the chalk escarpment to the west has prevented any major development, resulting in a green wedge of trees and greenery and an important refuge for wildlife. The area provides an important backdrop to views within the city centre and is of strategic importance to the city as a whole, not just as a conservation area. So this is the map of the site. As you can see, it's very convoluted, and for such a small site you can spend a long time exploring it because of the vast number of serpentine paths that go round it. And we've just been very pleased to open a new level access path through Ladbroke Place car park, which gives us wheelchair or pushchair access without steps up to the viewpoint. And we've already welcomed a number of people who are wheelchair users, so that is a great development. Here's a quick sort of outline of the sort of history that we'll be looking at. Going from the sort of industrial mining for chalk and flint in the 11th century, which created the steep escarpment, the building of St. Michael's Chapel and St. Leonard's Priory, the dissolution of the monasteries, Kett's Rebellion, a visit by Queen Elizabeth I, and then the ruins of the St. Michael's Chapel being of interest to romantic artists in the late 18th and early 19th century, and then more industrial activity in the 19th century with the gasworks. Kett's Heights also featured during the World Wars and then became very much a nature conservation area. So I'll be going through those elements during the presentation. So it has been suggested that there was a Roman road between Borbow and Bishopbridge in the centre of Norwich. It's thought to have followed a causeway across marshy ground to ford the Wensum in the area of Bishopbridge before heading east and perhaps mounting the ridge via Gas Hill. Those of you who know Norwich well know that Gas Hill is the steepest hill in Norwich, and the Gas Hill Gasp, an annual bike race, is a very impressive event. Norwich was mined for chalk and flints from the Middle Ages until the beginning of World War II. The chalk was used for liming in agriculture and in building mortar. Flints were used to build the city walls and some of Norwich's finest buildings, and the Guildhall is an excellent example. Initially, the chalk was excavated from an open hole, creating steep escarpments like those shaping Kett's Heights. But then tunnels were started from the side of the resulting pit, following the richest seams of flints. Tunnels have been found adjacent to Rosary Road and Chalk Hill Road, which were used as shelters during World War II. The oldest mines are closest to the centre of Norwich. As the city grew, mines were dug further out, and the last to close were at Harford Hills to the south of Norwich. Here you can see the wall of the Museum of Norwich at the Guildhall, and it is reputed to be the finest flint wall in Europe, because of the very close nature of the flint blocks. It is a beautiful wall. And here you can see evidence of the chalk mining. The bus going down the hole in the Earlham Road has entered into everybody's folk memory, I think. And certainly that's a very familiar view, that photograph. And here's a photograph of the Rosary Road chalk mines. If you go online and Google that, you will see somebody got into those tunnels some time ago and took an extensive range of photographs. It would be great to be able to go in, but sadly, I don't think it's safe, and they're not available to the public now. And another sort of iconic view is the Norwich City Football Club's football ground at the Nest, which was adjacent to Kett's Heights and took advantage of, again, the flat ground with the escarpment and the whole health and safety issues of those audience on those precarious stands above the football ground. I think a lot of people, the older generation, can remember that. So at the summit of Kett's Heights are the remains of St. Michael's Chapel. In the late 11th century, Herbert Lozinger, the first bishop of Norwich, embarked upon an ambitious building programme in the then marshy valley of the River Wensum, next to the growing but still small Anglo-Saxon town known as Northwick. He began putting up a mighty cathedral. At the same time, he also had a priory built on a clearing made in the wooded hills above the river at the top of what is now Gas Hill. It was dedicated to the French saint Leonard and covered 24 acres of land. An existing Saxon church dedicated to St. Michael had been among the buildings demolished to make room for the cathedral. To make amends, Lozinger also built a small chapel about 200 yards away from St. Leonard's and named it for St. Michael. For several centuries, the monks of St. Leonard's held daily services in the oblong-shaped building, about 42 feet in length and about 18 feet in width. At the dissolution of the monasteries, St. Leonard's Priory was given to the Dukes of Norfolk. The third Duke's son, the Earl of Surrey, built a fine house called Mount Surrey on the site, while Little St. Michael's fell into disuse. This is thought to be the remains of the boundary wall of St. Leonard's Priory on St. Leonard's Road, just downhill from the pub there, the Jubilee. Kett's rebellion began in July 1549 in the small market town of Wymondham as a protest against the enclosure of common land. Kett was about 57 years old and was one of the wealthier farmers in Wymondham. The rebels moved on to Norwich and set up camp on Mousehold Heath, where they had a vantage point overlooking Norwich. Kett set up his headquarters in St. Michael's Chapel, the ruins of which have since been known as Kett's Castle. Mount Surrey, a house built by the Earl of Surrey on the site of the despoiled St. Leonard's Priory, had lain empty since the Earl's execution in 1547 and was used to hold Kett's prisoners. Robert Kett held court under the Oak of Reformation. Here he is receiving one of the King's heralds who has come to offer terms for Kett's capitulation. We think the oak was situated where the water tower now is, on Telegraph Lane East. And you can see the cathedral spire in the background. Here's a reconstruction of what St. Michael's Chapel might have looked like in 1549. This was done by one of the friends of Kett's Heights, who is an artist and has also undertaken some work of reconstruction on archaeological sites in Norfolk. So we think this is a pretty good representation. The rebels were eventually routed and about 3,000 are thought to have been killed at the Battle of Dussindale. Kett was captured, tried for treason and hanged from the walls of Norwich Castle on the 7th of December, 1549. And you can see that plaque commemorating that event on the wall of the castle by the front door. And another commemoration of Kett's rebellion and Kett's death is on the bronze doors of City Hall. One of the plaques shows Robert Kett dangling, I suppose, with soldiers next to him. And the whole event is really described in great detail and very well by C.J. Sansom in his novel Tombland, which was the last of the Shardlake novels. So that's certainly worth a read. C.J. Sansom came to Norwich and did a lot of research, and it certainly is a very accurate representation, in my opinion. And the Friends of Kett's Heights have produced a walking tour, a downloadable walking tour of Shardlake's Norwich, so you can visit all the places, all the real places that are mentioned in the book, and finally come up to Kett's Heights to see the wonderful view. So do download that from the Norwich Society website. By 1723, both St. Michael's Chapel and St. Leonard's Priory were in ruins, as clearly seen here in this detail from a panorama of Norwich by Thomas Kirkpatrick. But this led to their attraction by artists. The picturesque and an appreciation of the roughness and variety in nature and buildings, especially ruins, flourished in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. This aesthetic provided the inspiration for artists and infused those of artistic sensibilities. The crumbling Norwich city walls and other ruins, such as St Michael's Chapel, provided the backdrop for artists and leisure entertainments. The romantic ruins were dubbed Kett's Castle. Although an 1834 map showed no path or access to the heights, the Reverend Henry Neville wrote of finding his way to the spot via rough ground near a windmill at the top of the hill. The Norwich Society of Artists was founded in 1803 by John Crome and Robert Ladbroke as a club where artists, including John Sell Cotman, could meet to exchange ideas. The Norwich School's great achievement was that a small group of self-taught working-class artists were able to paint with vitality the hinterland surrounding Norwich. During the mid-19th century, the painter and drawing master John Burney Ladbroke purchased a plot of land overlooking Norwich from Kett's Heights and built the Gothic house known as Kett's Castle Villa in 1857. A flint entrance archway facing onto St Leonard's Road bears the family crest. Of particular interest were the gardens he created, which contained several follies, including genuine medieval arches, which may have originated from St Michael's Chapel. Ladbroke is buried in the nearby Rosary Cemetery. And we maintain the artistic tradition here. We get a lot of artists and photographers up on Kett's Heights. And here we have the Paint Out Norwich artists enjoying a very lovely day.
The use of the area by artists and the public at large came to an end with the enclosure of what had been common land, part of Mousehold Heath, in the Thorpe Enclosure Award around 1800. And this is an extract from the draft enclosure map. The final one doesn't seem to have survived. Held it in the record office, and you'll see it specifically marks Kett's Castle. The effect of enclosure was shown in this poem published in a local paper in 1803, claiming that every schoolboy well Kett's Castle knows and lamenting the loss of access. And this was actually referenced in a Tate Gallery research publication titled Mousehold Heath as a Location. Part of the enclosed land was then sold to the Norwich Gas Light Company for its new works, built on the floor of a chalk and flint quarry close to the river, for easy delivery of coal by wherry. And you'll see on this new map of 1830, both the work shown and Kett's Castle. And this sketch by John Thurtle shows wherried tied up near Bishopbridge. Whether they were unloading coal or not, I have no idea. The extent of the gas company's ownership can be ascertained from the Thorpe Tithe Map and Award of 1842, again held in the record office, and the arrow points to Kett's Castle. And if we look at that in a bit more detail, you'll see a boundary for plot number 40, which was the gasworks ownership, right up against the chapel remains, Kett's Castle. Plot 38 was actually in different ownership at the time. But if we move on to 1875, what was by then the British Gaslight Company had taken over the Norwich one, prepared this plan of its two Norwich works held by the National Grid Gas Archive. And that shows that more land had been acquired running all the way north to what was then called Plumstead Road, but what is now known as Kett's Hill. Well, it's still Plumstead Road once you get to the top of the hill. And if we look at that plan in greater detail, what it shows is that the hilly area above the gasworks and around the chapel had by then been developed as gardens, and also a stable and shed had been constructed in the area now known as the Piggeries. Interestingly, the plan doesn't show greenhouses by the chapel site. You'll see at the bottom of that plan the name of the adjoining landowner, who's John Barney Ladbroke, as Vanessa mentioned earlier. But only a few years later, the Ordnance Survey surveyed what was then a very detailed 1 to 500 scale map. And this shows that there were greenhouses there at the time. So assuming both maps are accurate, we have a fairly narrow time frame for the erection of the greenhouses there. The gasworks were later extended with 2 more gas holders, one near Bishopbridge Road and the others on the opposite side of what became known first as Gas House Hill and now Gas Hill. And those are the 2 holders that have been demolished relatively recently. The greenhouses were still there in the 1930s, as can be seen from this aerial photograph. Whether in use or not, we don't know. The whole history of the erection and use of the greenhouses is something which doesn't seem to have been documented anywhere. We'd love to know more about it. So if anyone listening knows a source of information, do get in touch. Now, gas was originally used for lighting homes and streets. The use that we make of it today for cooking and heating came much later. And indeed, the name of the company, the Gaslight Company, provides clear evidence of the way that use was made of it. And another use was made for filling balloons. And in 1840, a crowd gathered at the bottom of Kett's Hill to watch a balloonist, Mr. Charles Green, ascend in his balloon Nassau. Very handy to have the gasworks there to supply your gas to fill your balloon. And with him was a monkey who was provided with a parachute. And allegedly the monkey was detached from the balloon as it was passing over Mousehold Heath. What subsequently happened to it, we have no idea. The establishment of the gasworks was a significant industrial event because it created for the first time a need for small cottage building, in contrast to the more leisurely house and terrace development that had begun to spread on the slopes in the area. And one of the features, we do have industrial archaeology here, not least in the terraces that you can see along St. Leonard's Road, built out of materials from the gasworks. And there were steps currently disused which connected the gasworks with the gardens. And indeed, it's our understanding that the gardens were made by the gas workers. And the first thing they did was build those steps and a zigzag path up. And they must have carried all the materials up to build the terraces and the gardens. The company also acquired other properties, including this house in St. Leonard's Road for the manager. There was direct access from the bottom of his garden into the works. The gasworks manager used materials from the gas kilns and flints to create garden terraces on Kett's Heights for the enjoyment of the gas workers. And it's our understanding that the gas workers had use of the gardens and allotments on the hillside to grow their own materials. The upper and lower greens, or what we today call the upper and lower greens, were used as kitchen gardens. A greenhouse was built onto the ruined walls of St. Michael's Chapel, and there was a boiler there with a pipe run up from the gasworks. During the Second World War, the communities were encouraged to grow their own food and keep pigs, and a pig club and small allotments were located on Kett's Heights. So pigs were fed with scraps from anything edible that came to hand. And when they were slaughtered, half the carcasses were sold to the government to help with rationing. And the club members had the use of what's left. And the site, what had been the stable block, was extra buildings were built around it and kept piggeries. And that can be seen in this aerial photograph from 1942, the land used for allotments on the Lower Green. By the 1970s, natural gas meant there was no longer a need for a gas works. And in fact, the gas works on Gas Hill had been used for distribution since about 1910, with the gas actually being made in the gas works on Palace Plain, where the courts are now. So it was a rather unusual system of two gas works, one making, one distributing. But you'll see from this slide that the works were being demolished. Although there is still use of gas on the site, in that there is a pipeline all the way from Bacton on the North Sea coast, bringing in gas from the North Sea to a compressor station, which is in one corner of the old site. So that gas pipe runs through Kett's Heights, and any time we want to do any work on trees that are near it, we have to make arrangements with Cadent, the operator, so that they're satisfied that we're not going to be damaging their pipeline. The other land was sold off.
Right, so what's happened in the last few years? In the 1970s, Kett's Heights was gifted to Norwich City Council in a very overgrown state. The city grew around it, it was forgotten, and it might not have been, and it might have remained that way if it wasn't given to the city by an anonymous benefactor in the 1970s. But as you can see there, it was really very overgrown. A group of enthusiastic volunteers helped clear the site and created an attractive space for wildlife, leisure and recreation. Unfortunately, we don't have any photographs apart from these of the results of all this hard work. But a plan of Kett's Heights at the time shows an old orchard, a butterfly meadow and a picnic area. And you can see from those notices that certainly activities were held there, and people report, I think somebody said they once bought a lovely cardigan there at a craft fair or something. It was so obviously a lot of activity was ongoing, including this event, which was the lighting of the beacon commemorating the victory over the Spanish Armada in 1988. You may be surprised to hear that Norwich wished to commemorate the victory over the Armada, since the Armada never threatened Norwich. It did sail up the coast, but I think sort of thought Yarmouth wasn't very interesting and went up to Northumberland. But in 1988, there was a nationwide event with beacons set up throughout the country and lit on a particular occasion. So this was that particular occasion. There is a sort of rather funny story there that the beacon was lit by a Sea Scout, obviously standing on top of that structure with a ladder, and the wind went in the wrong direction. And a friend of mine who was there could hear the Sea Scout calling out, "Help, I'm burning." So not much health and safety protection in those days. Moving on to 2017, where the beacon was lit again as part of a theatrical performance by the Common Lot, who did a theatrical performance of Vanessa Trevelyan. And in the evening performance, we all rampaged up to the beacon, which was lit. And as you can see, that was a very windy night. So you didn't want to be sort of downwind of that particular beacon. But the difference with the 1988 occasion was such that there was like a 10-page health and safety risk assessment. A special beacon lighter was hired to do the lighting. There was a cordoned off protection zone. So it was a very different occasion, but it was very, very dramatic, and we all enjoyed it a great deal. But after the 80s, enthusiasm again dwindled and the site became overgrown, until in 2015, the Friends of Kett's Heights was set up with encouragement from the City Council, who was encouraging communities to get involved in their local amenities. And what John and I were founder members of the Friends of Kett's Heights, and the intention was that we wanted it to be a welcoming space for the local community and visitors to Norwich, an attractive space with a diversity of plants and wildlife, an event space where activities could be held, and an educational space where the long and diverse history could be investigated and interpreted. And I think we have really achieved those things. We encourage people to use Kett's Heights for leisure, for walking, for dog walking, just for sitting and chatting, which has been very successful. We offer free guided tours on the first Sunday of each month from April to October, but also groups can book free tours if they wish. And we have an events programme. We have various sort of craft activities, come and build a nest on Kett's Heights with found materials, and those again have been very popular. And we support school groups who are studying Kett's Rebellion, it's lovely to welcome young people onto Kett's Heights. I mentioned the common lot, and here is a photograph of one of their performances. The lower green provides a natural amphitheatre, and you can get 300 to 500 people on there quite comfortably. And we also do a lot of activities each Heritage Open Day. So we provide talks or guided tours or trails or whatever. And again, those are very popular. So we have a dedicated practical works team. What you see here is the view from the viewpoint, the viewpoint without a view. As a result of the work that was done, we now have a view back on Kett's Heights by removing the scrub sort of immediately next to the beacon. We've also put up signage, so at least people know that Kett's Heights is there and available and somewhere nice to visit. We've got a sign on the viewpoint telling you some of the high spots you can see in Norwich. We cleared paths because otherwise it's quite difficult to get around. Some of the paths, as if you remember from the map, it's very convoluted, and if there's a lot of greenery, then it's difficult to get around. And we've removed ivy and painted railings and generally tried to make the site, look more welcoming and clear. There are a lot of these walls made out of flints or materials from the gasworks that need repairing. And we have a daily litter clearance, and also if there's any graffiti, we deal with that immediately. The council will deal with obscene graffiti very quickly, but anything else we have to do ourselves, which is fine. With a paintbrush and a tin of paint, you can do it very easily. And there's been a number of storms that have brought down trees, and we need help to clear storm damage. In some ways, the storms can be very beneficial because they help clear some of the thickest trees. We have rather a lot of self-seeded sycamores, which have grown up. And we've undertaken surveys of plants, birds and butterflies to really check the diversity of Kett's Heights. We didn't discover anything amazingly rare or special. It's just a nice green space that does have a reasonably wide variety of flora and fauna. We've been pruning the old apple trees and planting new fruit trees as well, which again have been very successful. And we planted well over 5,000 snowdrops now. Our snowdrop display in the early part of each year is starting to look really, really lovely. The bluebells, I regret to say, don't do anything because of a reason which we'll come to. And we've created herb garden and sensory gardens where the greenhouses were in the old chapel. And this again provides a lovely area where people can sit. We thought a herb garden was really relevant because it's in the footprint of the old chapel, and the monks were known for their medicinal gardens. So we thought that would be a nice nod to the monastic past. And our sensory garden, and we created a new upper viewpoint as well, little upper viewpoint terrace, again has proved very very successful. Although we're right at the top of the escarpment and you'd expect it to be a very windy place, old panoramas show a whole row of windmills. In fact, because of the trees and the chapel wall, it is really a protected space, so it's very pleasant to sit there. We've created a new picnic table on the upper green. There you can see very pleased with themselves volunteers having a little break. And we've got a new seat at the viewpoint made out of old materials found around the site. Wherever possible, we do reuse what we can find or superfluous material from the council. And we're very lucky that we have a lot of supporters. And here we have somebody who donated a bench in the sensory garden in memory of his wife. The walls around Kett's Heights are created out of materials from the old gas kilns. As you can see, they're very irregular, and in time the mortar has come out. Our volunteers have received training in lime mortar, and here you can see them having a go at restoring the boundary walls with a particular sort of lime mortar. They've also been working on restoring St. Michael's Chapel with a different sort of lime mortar. So it's all very technical, but we're fully trained and it's being done to a high standard. And we've also renovated the pond, which we think was attached to the piggeries. And although a very small and perhaps not very attractive pond, we're disguising it with attractive planting, and it is home to a lot of frogs and tadpoles in the season. There's ongoing maintenance to be done, and here you can see volunteers from Aviva who came for a day to repaint all our railings. So thank you very much to Aviva for that. And we obviously continue with our monthly tours, which are very popular. I mentioned the bluebells didn't have much of a chance, and one of the reasons is munkjack. They sadly love Kett's Heights and the surrounding area, and we are pestered with them. And unfortunately, the more diverse planting we introduce, really, I think the more attractive buffet we provide for the munkjack. So we do find that some things really have no chance. Snowdrops are fine, daffodils are fine, most plants are fine, bluebells, absolutely not. We've also been trying to cope with the climatic changes, and we're trying out a new gravel garden and a grass garden, and those are coming on very well. The one at the top is sadly rather an old photograph and doesn't look like very much, but now it has really grown up quite considerably. And one of the delights of our recent years is that the Norwich City Council have invested a stupendous amount of money from the Community Infrastructure Levy to provide level access, which I mentioned at the beginning, but here you can see evidence that actually people can get in much more easily, and we are receiving many more visitors as a result, which is lovely. And the old steps, which had become very, very worn, have been resurfaced. And those are the ones from Kett's Hill. So if you're coming in that way, it's a lot easier as well. And we have ourselves introduced a nice path providing level access to the viewpoint. And again, that's working very well. So we're very pleased that we have received a number of awards. The CPRE award in 2021 for digging deep. We're not quite sure what digging deep means because we don't do any deep digging, but I suppose digging deep into your resources and your enthusiasm is perhaps what it is. And we've also received the Green Flag Award this year, which means that we meet certain standards and have a plan in place, and the council was very keen for us to apply for that, and we were very glad to receive it and celebrate it on that very rainy day. We will be getting an actual flag. We have got a flagpole. We will get an actual flag to fly in due course. And if you want to find out more about us, we have a very good website. If you look at the various items on the agenda, we have various trails that you can follow and information sheets and so on. So it's well worth exploring our website. And also we have a Facebook page if you want to keep in touch with us. And if you're a friend, you get a monthly newsletter. So that's all from John and me. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be very happy to receive any questions.